Wel, er waren kennelijk opnameproblemen. Halverwege de band stopte opeens de opname Transition from Humanhood. We gaan dus nu verder met de klas 27 april 57 van band 5 van de London Class 1957, maar nu spoor 2, Hypnotism and Mesmerism Sense.
You have read that out of every 100,000 people who go to Lourdes, 15 people are healed. And so your question might be, is there any use of going to Lourdes? Well, certainly for those 15 people it was. And probably even the other 100,000 received some measure of help of which we know nothing, because all help can't be measured by physical healing. So the question is, if you could ascertain what degree of help they received, and that would satisfy you, the answer is certainly go to Lourdes or have communion. That is something that every individual must meet themselves. There are people who have found great peace and great spiritual light through orthodox religious life, whether in the Christian church or the Hebrew church. I have known many in many different churches who are completely at peace and have found their answers. And they have had their help. And that's the answer for them. For many of us, even if we had a physical healing, mental or moral or financial healing, it wouldn't satisfy us, because we would be like, was it Brother Lawrence who said, or St. Francis, that my soul will never rest until it rests in thee. And so it is that many of us will say to you that for us there is no fulfillment until we are at home in God, and nothing less will satisfy. So all these things are matters of individual experience. I answered this about the progress being made with the little children. Yes, progress is being made. Two friends have committed suicide, and what happens to the souls of those who take their own lives? You are coming into the realm of conjecture, and there's only one answer that we can be absolutely sure of, and that is this, that each individual, whether on this plane or another, has to work out their own salvation until they find themselves at home in God. Now, whether you work out your problem on this plane and face every difficulty as it comes up until you find yourself at home, or whether one finds that the struggle is too hard and commits suicide, they still have to work it out. Nobody's going to go to heaven just because they shoot themselves. That's certainty. Each one still has to work out their own salvation, and the more problems you give yourself, the harder it is. So the best thing to do is to be satisfied those you've already got are hard enough. Don't take any more on your shoulder. But nobody's ever going to be happy. Nobody's ever going to be content. Not if they demonstrate all the money there is, not if they demonstrate being president 4 times. Even then, they're going to die unhappy. Nobody's going to be satisfied with health. Nobody. In the end, everyone has to find an inner peace. Never forget that. The great of the world have not found peace. Uneasy lies the head that wears a crown, they say. And certainly that is true, that the higher one's human responsibilities, the less peace there is, unless they can approach their responsibilities from the standpoint of the Father within me, he doeth the works. You know, someday the presidents of the world, the prime ministers of the world, whoever the great leaders of the world are, must all be men and women of deep religious bent. Otherwise there will be no hope for humanity, because the problems of the world are going to be solved by the religious practice of finding oneself in God. There are no such things as treaties to solve anything but temporary problems. You probably read in the paper this morning that the question of treaties or new agreements with Russia came up. And the article, the editor brought out that so far Russia has never honored a single written or spoken agreement. I know, but who has? Who has? Isn't that the history of the whole world of governmental affairs? Broken treaties, broken covenants, broken words. Oh, probably not to the extent that Russia has, but enough to keep the world in turmoil. Every nation is guilty of it. Every nation has been guilty of it. There hasn't been a pure nation on the face of the earth. And there never will be, as long as their reliance is on material power. There never will be. They all have to deviate. That's the lesson that we're learning from the news in the paper right now. A few weeks ago, the President of the United States stood foursquare on the fact that there mustn't be any armed intervention. We must settle this thing peacefully. And so now the 6th Fleet of the Navy's on the way to... You see what I mean? That as long as your reliance is on force, ultimately you have to break your own word. You can't help it. It isn't that you want to. It isn't that Mr. Eisenhower isn't a perfectly well-meaning man and a man of religious inspiration. But his religious inspiration isn't enough to carry a whole nation or a whole world. And so it is. Please remember this, that the leaders, the national leaders of the future, must also be men and women of deep religious, even if it isn't the highest form of religion, at least if it's leaning toward the religious aspect, so that eventually, because we're not dealing with time, peace on earth isn't going to come in your time or mine. It's an evolutionary thing, and it will come, and we're on the way to it. But we're on the way to it only because it is more and more recognized that force isn't the matter, rather matter and force isn't the answer. And so now the world is turning to spiritual thought. Well, of course, they haven't found the spiritual formula, because they'd have to go all the way back to Jesus Christ to find it. And they haven't turned back the pages yet. Now, will you please explain Ephesians? Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers. Probably on the understanding of that passage rests the whole of salvation. If you only knew it, our enemy is not Russia or communism or NASA, and it never was the Kaiser or Hitler. No. If those were our enemies, most of those have already been overcome. They've been overcome, they're out of the way, and we're still in trouble. And for every one that goes, a new one springs up. So you see, they never were our enemies. Our enemy is universal hypnotism, a subject that is absolutely unknown these days outside of our work. Universal hypnotism is the cause of whatever ill that you're suffering from. It isn't anything wrong thinking that you're doing in your mind, or that your parents did or your grandparents did. It isn't the tyrants of the world, because all of the 99% of the tyrants of the world are now dead. But tyranny still goes on. Behind this world of appearances is the one devil, and that is a universal hypnotism that has resulted in the word I. I, Joel. I, Bill. I, Mary. And the minute that word I comes in, and you'll find this back in the book, The Infinite Way, the only devil is I. The only devil in all the world is I. Not the I which is God, but I, Joel, I, Bill, I, Mary. Why? Because I want something. I need something. And at first I'm willing to work for it. But if I don't get enough of it that way, I'm willing to lie for it. And if I don't get enough that way, I'm willing to steal for it. And if I don't get enough that way, I'm willing to kill for it. All because I must be fed. Fed either with food or glory or honors or more land. I was thinking yesterday, we were driving past one of your great castles where one of the great kings lived. I don't know whether a great king or not, but a king anyhow. And in his day there was a constant warring, because I have pictures in my mind of those heavy armored things that they wore going in and out. And as I was thinking of the date of that castle, I thought, my heavens, just imagine, back in those days there were almost nobody on this island. And here was this king and all his fellows going out to conquer some more land. What they were going to do with it after they got it. And don't forget this, in those days there were kings coming over here to conquer this. But they had lands even bigger than this. Do you not see what I mean, that it had nothing to do with men or times? It had to do with I. Somebody had to have enough land to glorify himself, and if he didn't get it on one island, he took two. We had it in Hawaii. We have 6 islands there. And believe it or not, we had 3 kings, and they went out and slew each other and all their forces until one owned all the islands. Why? There is enough glory on any one of those islands to last anybody forever, and enough wealth. But did it satisfy him? No. I'm not going to be king of this island. I'm going to be king of all the islands. That's the devil. It's a state of mesmerism that results in personal sense. The healing of disease, once you understand this, becomes very simple. You never bother with the name of your patient or what disease they're suffering from. You go down to the roots. You lay the axe at the roots and you say, here, wait a minute. This is nothing but a universal mesmerism taking form as I. And then you get back to our great principle of one power in the infinite way. Since God is the only power, mesmerism, hypnotism, will belief, none of that's power, and you annihilate it. And that's where your healing comes in. It hasn't anything to do with whether your patient is suffering from rheumatism or unemployment. It has nothing to do with whether they're suffering from a right leg that's bad or a liver that's bad. Behind the whole thing is a universal hypnotism resulting in the word I. And when you know that, and then begin to analyze hypnotism itself and see that it's just a mental power that isn't a power, except where it's accepted. That's what constitutes the mind of a healer, the one that will not accept hypnotism as a power. Now let me show you what I mean. We have the illustration in our writings of the hypnotist who makes his stooge see a white poodle. And so we have our stooge, and he says, oh, I've got a white poodle. Help me get rid of him. Who is the only person who can help him? The one who isn't seeing a white poodle. The one who can say, why, there are no white poodles, that's just a state of hypnotism. That breaks the hypnotism. That breaks it. The white poodle is a decoy, and if you see it and try to remove it, you're hypnotized too. And if you're trying to heal your patient's rheumatism, or your patient's unemployment, or your patient's cancer, you're hypnotized too. And it's the blind leading the blind. When you can look at any form of sin, disease, death, lack, and limitation, and see that it isn't there at all, there's nothing but a hypnotized person in front of you, and then realize that, you break the hypnotism for them. That's the end of the spell. When you can deal with nothing but hypnotism. You'll find that in the writings. More especially, you'll find it in what we call the practitioner's chapter, the New Horizon in the Infinite Way, in which we are taught, and that's our practitioner's Bible, that chapter, in which we are taught never try to improve humanhood. Improved humanhood isn't any more spiritual than bad humanhood. As a matter of fact, bad humanhood leads to spirituality better than good humanhood does. The good humans don't need it so much. But try to understand this. You are never dealing with rheumatism. You're never dealing with cancer. You're never dealing with lameness or polio. You're never dealing with deafness or blindness. You're never dealing with unemployment. You're never dealing with lack. All you're dealing with is the hypnotic appearance of those things bound up in a person called I. I Jim, I Bill, I Mary, I Joel. Now, once you see that sin, disease, death do not exist as form, you've conquered it. Now back to our story. Can a hypnotist make a white poodle? No. All they can do is create a mental image of it in thought, and then only to the person who is hypnotized. And so I say to you, there is no such thing as physical disease. There is no such thing as a moral disease. There is no such thing as a financial disease. For none of these have ever been externalized. And that's why the master could go up and touch a leper. And that's why he could say to the crippled man, what did hinder you? Get up and walk. For the simple reason that he wasn't hypnotized. But anybody that looks for a mental cause for a physical disease is just as hypnotized as the patient. Anyone that blames a patient for their troubles is just as hypnotized as the patient. Because actually, there is nothing present in the experience of anyone except that they're hypnotized. And the proof of it is that when you're dehypnotized, you wake up and say, well, whereas before I was blind, now I see. Before I was crippled with rheumatism, and now I can walk. 1921, the doctors gave me 3 months to live. It's been the longest 3 months they've ever counted. Why? Because the thing that they said was there and real was proved by a competent practitioner to be not there and unreal. What was there? I was hypnotized with the appearances of that day, with the beliefs of that day. That's all. And all the practitioner had to do was break the hypnosis by knowing it wasn't a power. Don't ask me afterward how you break hypnosis. I'm telling you. By knowing it isn't a power. Hypnosis can't create white poodles. Hypnosis can't create rheumatism. It can create only a belief in your mind that you have it. But the only thing that will get rid of it is breaking the hypnotism. Now be assured of this. That's why I said that after 1,002 cases, you'll eventually come to where you won't use the letter of truth, because there'll only be one letter of truth. You snap your finger at hypnotism, knowing it's not power. And wherever there's a receptive state of thought, you meet it. And that brings us to this. Will you please explain the meaning of the middle path, as mentioned in the Infinite Way Wisdoms? Yes. The middle path is when you're not trying to make a sick person into a well person, but you're looking right down the middle to their Christhood, which is the reality of their being. When you're not trying to make an unemployed person employed and then thinking you've done something spiritual, but when you look through the appearance to the Christhood of an individual, that is the middle path. That middle path is the way the Master worked. The Master wasn't concerned just with making sick people well, but overcoming the world, overcoming the whole world of even healthy people, so as to see their Christhood. He didn't ask his disciples, did they see a good Jesus? No, what he wanted them to see was Christ. And so it is when he said, even the devils are subject unto us through thy name. He rebuked them. That isn't what they were for, to destroy devils. They were to see that their names were written in heaven. They were spiritual beings. They were the Christ of God, the children of God. That's the middle path. Not trying to find a mental cause for a physical disease, not saying to your patient, you must be more loving, you must be more generous, you must be more tolerant, you must be more... That's nonsense. No, I won't say that. That's psychology. That's changing a bad human into a good human, if you can do it. It's been tried by experts. But when you can ignore the appearances of either good or evil, and always look through the appearance, through the mesmerism, through the hypnotism, and see the pure Christ, the light that every individual is at the center of their being, and the reason we're here, struggling to have that light come through. That's why we're here. It's the only reason any of us is in this room. We want our Christhood to escape from its shell in there and come out into visibility, and we know that by being in company like this, we're having the help of each other. No one is here to get things. No one is here to benefit from somebody else in the room. Nobody is here to take anything away from anyone. Then what are they here for? To share whatever light of Christ is within them. Whether it's student or teacher, that's the truth of what's going on in this room. The desire that our Christhood may be brought to light. And so it is. When you look up here and you don't see a man sitting in a chair, but rather say, no, no, no. That's some state of God consciousness that's been lifted up to reveal light. And I look out there and say, no, 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 these are not men and women. This is not male and female. This is the child of God struggling into expression. Then we're helping each other. We're praying for each other. And where two or more are gathered together, we're going to succeed. It isn't going to be quick. It isn't going to be overnight. When it does come, it's going to come in the twinkling of an eye. When it does come, it's going to come in a flash. But leading up to that point is where our work comes in. But always remember this. We're not dealing with dictators, because if we killed them all off, a whole new crop would spring up tomorrow. It isn't more than a couple of years ago that over in the States, they started to ignore all the problems of over here, because we had the bad dictator down in South America. Well, he's gone. He's gone. South America's at peace. Now we're back over here looking for more trouble. And finding it. It's all right. Every effort they're making is for good. I have nothing to find fault with on that. I'm only saying that from our permanent standpoint, that's not the answer. The answer is not the destruction of tyrants. The answer is not the destruction of disease. If you had the power to walk into a hospital and just walk around and say abracadabra, and everybody leave there healthy, where do you think they'd be next week if you could take an inventory? Back again, of course they would, because that's where they wanted to be in the first place. Most of them. Don't ever forget this. You don't benefit people merely by healing them or enriching them. You don't do that one single bit. It's nice on a human plane, but sometimes you get them in worse trouble than they were before. The real thing is to set people free in their Christhood. And the only way you can do that is to recognize that they're not bound by principalities or powers. They're bound by hypnotism. It is, first of all, a religious hypnotism that's come down from the pagan days in a belief that there's a God somewhere that was immaculately conceived and hung on a tree. And everybody sitting around waiting to benefit because somebody got crucified sometime. Don't you see that all of that came down to us from pagan days, from pagan teachings, and we still keep looking for a salvation outside of ourselves that ultimately must be found inside of ourselves. And you know why? Because crucifixion is the truth. It's got to be crucified in us. I have to be crucified in me so that I can come to light. That's the answer. Not waiting to benefit by somebody else's crucifixion, but to be willing to be crucified oneself so that their Christhood can come to life and be revealed. So it is. Begin. I knew that this class something was happening in it. I knew it was, and it is. We were coming out into adulthood, spiritual adulthood. When I can say to you, in a class this large, stop this warring against rheumatism and cancer and consumption and tyrants, stop it. And begin to understand that this world is a victim of hypnotism and lay the axe at the root. And just know that hypnotism never did produce a white poodle or a cancer or consumption or a tyrant or tyranny. That's the belief that's binding us, the belief that these things are real. Now, we are the only ones who can meet the world situation because we are not going to war with men or sins or diseases. We are going to realize that behind all of this trouble in the world is the hypnotism that results in the personal sense of I. And we're going to know that hypnotism isn't a power. It's only accepted by the deluded. And the moment we realize that since the I of me is God, I can't be deluded. There was a time when aviators were captured and hypnotized to give answers, and one of the solutions found was to teach these men that when they were captured, or if they were captured, to just keep remembering 2 times 2 or 4. And that works. If only you can hold one statement of truth in your mind, you can't be hypnotized. And that is why the basic principle of the infinite way is abide in the word of truth. If you only know one passage, abide in it. You will never be hypnotized if you can keep truth active in your consciousness. And if you do get temporarily hypnotized, some one of us will come along and lift you out. But if you are just sitting back in mental fogginess or mental laziness and expecting someone to break the hypnotism for you, it won't work. But if you yourself are holding to passages of truth, morning, noon, and night, meeting situations with truth in your abide in the Word and let the Word abide in you. Those that dwell in the secret place of the Most High, none of the evils of the world will come nigh their dwelling place. That's the whole secret. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on thee. Acknowledge him in all thy ways, and he will give thee rest. The Bible is full of it. Keep your consciousness filled with statements and realizations of truth, and you can't be hypnotized with error. If you know 2 times 2 is 4, you can't be made to accept 2 times 2 is 5. If you can be made to understand God is the only power, nobody can hypnotize you. Because you won't give power both to God and hypnosis. It's only when you have to... Why do you think we stress page after page after page that there's only one power? Because the world acknowledges the power of hypnotism, and it lets itself be hypnotized morning, noon, and night. One day it's with a fear that... Well, didn't we read in this morning's paper here? They have a remedy and a prevention for polio, but if they give it at the wrong time, the puncture will make you have polio. Oh, what kind of hypnotism is it? It cures you, it prevents it, and it gives it to you. How many different ways can you be hypnotized with the same remedy? It's both a cause and a cure and a... Now let's get back. Do you not see that every minute of the day there is a hypnotism at work? And you have only one remedy, truth. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Where the spirit of truth is, there is liberty. In the presence of truth, there is fullness of life. Abide in the secret place of the Most High, truth, and none of the evils will come nigh thy dwelling place. Let this word of truth abide in you, and you abide in this word of truth, and you will bear fruit richly. It's a principle given to us of old time by the greatest spiritual masters of all time, that if you keep your consciousness filled with truth, the hypnotism of this world cannot come upon you, and you'll be able to say, I have overcome the world. The world consists of a mesmeric influence, and it results in the word I. Now there is a time on your spiritual path when you reach the stages of mysticism, when to a great extent that word I disappears from your experience. I say to a great extent. It doesn't disappear entirely until the ascension, above all material sense. But at least it disappears in this degree that you no longer say, I want to be healed, or I want to be enriched, or I want to be employed. You never think of truth in connection with I. You think of it always as principle. In other words, your own life, your own self, your own affairs are forgotten. You are engaged in the activity of a principle. And it was Saroyan who said, we only go along for the ride. And it's really true. It's this principle that lives, and we go along as beholders, watching it at work. And that is why the mystics never have to be concerned about their supply or their health. They have come to a place where they never allow themselves to intrude into their thought any more than the fact that they have to bathe or eat and probably have a place to sleep. Everything that comes into their experience, even the bathing and the eating and the sleeping, is theirs by grace. They don't have to take thought for it. And so it is. Now let's see what we can do here. Rest a while, won't you? You know, we have been going steadily. And so as we are faced with the problems of everyday living, whether on a personal scale, community scale, national or international, let our quick remembrance be this. We are not dealing with persons or conditions. We're dealing with a state of mesmerism that claims to operate. As discord, inharmony, injustice, sin, disease. But hypnotism can produce nothing more real than a mental image and thought. It can't produce a person, a condition, or a thing. It is in fact nothingness in light of the fact that God, the light of my being, is the only power. Remember that you must never separate yourself from God. When you bring the word God into the picture in your meditations or treatments, please remember always that you're speaking of the presence and the power that's already within you. And above all, don't believe for a minute that you have to conform to something to make it operate. In other words, don't believe that if you sinned an hour ago that it won't operate for you. Don't believe that if you forgot the things that you should have remembered that it won't operate for you. Because the secret is that it never stops operating. There is no God that can withhold from you. There is no God withholding anything from you. So don't have a condemnation feeling, self-condemnation, or unworthiness, or unrighteousness. Begin where you are as of this minute, even though your sins are scarlet. Begin where you are this second, and realize that God at the center of me, the light within me, annihilates every picture that hypnotism can paint. Always remember that you have no enemies, not even your own sins. You have only to realize God in the midst of me is mighty. He that is within me is greater than he that is in the world. He performeth that which is given me to do. He that is within me, perfecteth that which concerneth me. And if my sins are scarlet, I'll be white as snow. I have no enemies, because now I know that never in all this world has there been an evil man or woman. As Paul said, the good I would I do not lie. Not that I sin, but that I find a sense of sin in me. Certainly, this world-old belief of a selfhood apart from God. Don't fight people. Don't fight conditions. Don't fight sins. Don't fight diseases. Sit back. The Lord at the center of my being, is my shepherd. I shall not want. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. For the Lord is my shepherd. He knoweth my needs before I do. It is his good pleasure to give them to me. Even to the prodigal son, even to the woman taken in adultery, even to the thief on the cross. It is his good pleasure to give me the kingdom. And in giving me the kingdom, all the product, the results of hypnotism are wiped out. No longer do I war with people or things or conditions. Now I sit back and rest. Thank thee, Father, thou hast shown me the truth. There is no sin. There is no disease. There is no death. There is a hypnotic suggestion, and now I know that hypnotism can't produce people or things or conditions, only illusions. Now I shall not fear what man can do to me. For I know there's only one power. Yes, my doctor just said to me that this condition can't be cured. But the Hebrew said to their master, the enemy that's coming against us is twice as big as we are, and better armed. And he turned around and said, they have only the arm of flesh. Nothing. And so you can say to your doctor, that's right, that's your human wisdom. But all you've got is human wisdom. But the Father at the center of my being is a divine power, and it is the only power. Certainly, the world says, I haven't enough education. I haven't enough experience. I haven't enough opportunity. Certainly, all of the hypnotism of the world says those things, but what do I answer? They have only the arm of flesh. I have the Lord God Almighty, the one and the only power. And so this question is Galatians 6:14, but God forbid that I should glory, save in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, by whom the world is crucified unto me, and I unto the world. And therein we have what I've just said, that you can't glory in my power, you can't glory in the power over devils. The only glory is in the cross that was revealed to us, that the world is crucified. The world is destroyed by this realization of that which has to be overcome. James 5. And the prayer of faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up, and if he have committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. Confess your faults one to another, and pray one for another, that ye may be healed. The effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. Do you not see this? That if you know this truth, if you know this truth that has been given in this class, rest assured you are a righteous man. You have right knowledge, right understanding, right spirituality, and your prayer will heal the sick. The minute you no longer fight rheumatism, cancer, and consumption, and begin to understand that all you have to do is nullify the belief that hypnotism is power. Why is hypnotism not power? Because I, the God in the midst of me, is the only power. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Is there any other power? Is there any other might in heaven, on earth, or in hell than God? No. Then hypnotism is not a power. And in knowing that, you have got the prayer that availeth much. None of these old-fashioned prayers of God to heal my dear sick child has ever availed. Although I knew a woman who was a very, very religious Baptist, who, when her 21-year-old son was dying of pneumonia, and began, after the doctors told her that he would die that night, there was no hope. And at first she began to pray to God to save her son, and then all of a sudden it dawned on her that she was dishonoring God. And she said, God, he's not my son, he's yours. You do with him what you want. I give him back to you. And by morning he was healed. But he wasn't a gradual healing. It was an instantaneous and complete healing. Why? Because she no longer acknowledged the power of death. She didn't care whether he was on this side of the world or the other side of the world. She knew it wasn't death. And she knew he couldn't get outside of God's power. And that was acknowledging one power. When she acknowledged that, she had the healing. Is that clear? God is the only power. Read that on every page of our writings. And then realize that the only opposition there is to that God is in our belief in hypnotism. He that believeth on the Son of God hath witness in himself. He that believeth not God hath made him a liar. I guess that's it. 1 John 5, 10b. Wait a minute. 10b. I don't have any b. He that believeth on the Son of God hath witness in himself. Well, I don't have any B in here, but evidently what we're dealing with is that he that believeth on the Son of God hath witness in himself. Isn't that clear that if you actually believe and understand that we are the Son of God, that you have witness within your own self, as Peter did, who do men say that I am? A resurrected Hebrew prophet. Who do ye say that I am? Ye, my disciples. Oh, says Peter, thou art the Christ. That's it. You have borne witness. Now you have witness in yourself to Christhood. So it is. Who do ye say that I am? If you do not believe that I am the Son of God, you are not very spiritually developed. And be assured of this. If I didn't know that you were the very Christ of God, nothing that I have said in this entire class or any previous one would have power or weight. The only weight my words have is because it's backed up with a conviction that you are not men and women as you seem to be, but that you're the very Christ of God, and that you will come to that realization in proportion as you refuse to let yourself be hypnotized by appearances. A child is born deaf and as a result is unable to learn to speak. Can you give us a message of comfort to the parents and relatives? Yes. The message that I would say is this. There are no incurable diseases. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. In His presence, there is fullness of life. I would say to these parents and these relatives, make it your business to find God, experience God, be touched by the Spirit of God, and help that child find its freedom. Last year, March, in New York City, a woman came to me who was the aunt of a child who was the victim of cerebral palsy, an incurable case. And the parents were not interested in any spiritual healing. They were just resigned to the fact that their child would be what it was. But this aunt couldn't rest satisfied, wanted my help. I says, I cannot work with you forever, but I can do this. I can give you help while we're here and show you how to continue help, and if you have enough love in your heart for that child, you'll keep it up until the child responds. And this year, when I was back, also in March, the lady tells me that this child is riding a bicycle and is in school. That's one of our cases that has come out from under that hypnotism. If we really love these children, we will learn how to pray. We will learn how to make God a reality, and we will bring to them whatever measure of healing we can. I don't know whether to listen to the words you speak or close my eyes. It doesn't make any difference. Do what God leads you to do. I think that is our class for this year. And I would like to say this to you. Remember that we are in the midst of a world of turmoil. Our leaders, political, national, international, need our prayers. Not the prayers of people who want to go to God to have our side win. They can't be helped with such prayers. Nor by the prayers of those who want the other side to lose. They need the prayers of those of us who are willing to forget person, place, and thing, go to the Father every day for a brief period and say, Thy will be done on earth. Thy will be done on earth. Open the minds and hearts and souls of all religious and all political and all government leaders, that Thy grace may be the sufficiency. And then let that operate where it will. And you will find then that your prayers will be responded to on both sides of the border. Never accept the belief that your side is right and the other side is wrong. No side is right, no side is wrong. God alone is. And if we give our leaders that support, they will be divinely led in the way that this world should go. Thank you. Thank you. I can tell you from my heart, it's been a glorious class.